Okay, welcome back. This is lesson number 2, and it's a very, very short lecture. It's just one slide. This is all about the therapeutic relationship. You can learn more about that from the handout that I have emailed to you, the reading I've emailed to you, and it's talked a little bit about in Jacqueline Small's book as well. But here it is in a nutshell. There are really some significant differences between the professional and personal relationship. The one thing that's not different is that they are genuine and that we really do need to care for other people. And if we can't, then there's no way for us to be effective in working with them. So we have to establish and maintain a relationship with people in the professional realm just the same way as we would in a personal realm if we want to actually make a difference in people's lives. If we can't do that, then we're not the person for that person, or at least not yet. Personal relationships are mutually beneficial, not always equal. There are times in our lives when, for example, somebody is being a bigger supporter than the other partner. This might be happening in your life right now as you're a student. Your partners might be reaching out and doing more to help you be a student than in other circumstances. But typically you're giving something back to them as well, and you'll kind of catch up later on. In a professional relationship, the differential's very, very significant. The professional is giving something to the client. It's entirely one direction, and the person on the professional side is rewarded financially. They get paid to do the job. So it does not go in both directions. In the personal relationship, there is rarely a power differential. Now, there can be power differentials in some ways, for example, parents and children, but there's not a specific power differential, and that parent-child dynamic can change, especially as children get older. In the therapeutic relationship, the professional carries authority, and because they carry authority, we have to have a real carefulness about this, and we'll talk about that a bit more, but there are some real ethics that are affected because of that authority, and that authority can never be removed. Even if a person, let's say, moves on from being in our service, we cannot expect that that authority has gone. So, for example, imagine a person is counseling a young woman, a man is counseling a young woman, the young woman seems to do really well, and 5 years later, the counselor meets the young woman in the community and seems interested in that person and asks her out on a date. That really should never happen, because in the mind of that client, they'll always have been in the submissive role. They'll always have been in the less powerful role. And because of that, there's the potential for manipulation or mistreatment of people. They're not coming at the relationship from a position of equality. With personal relationships, boundaries evolve. They get bigger, they get lower, depending on the type of relationship you have. So, for example, I'll bet you that many of you that have boyfriend-girlfriend type relationships may have started out with that person as a colleague or a coworker, and then perhaps an acquaintance, and then a friend, and then to a more intimate relationship. Children often go from being the people who are receiving direction and care from their parents to later on in life becoming the ones who are doing some of that caregiving. Another example is what happens if you work someplace and somebody is your colleague, and then another day later you get promoted. Those boundaries would evolve. You might share less information if suddenly you were the supervisor of that person. But in the therapeutic relationship, the boundaries are always firm, and they're not just boundaries but other limits. So, for example, we would never give people our personal contact information and tell them where we live. We would never meet with them in certain settings. For example, if I was a counselor and I was working with you in my home office, and this does happen, my home office would not be in the same place as the rest of my home. And typically people literally have different entrances, and they don't put all their personal belongings there. And it can be difficult to maintain these boundaries, but they do need to be there. Number 4, The personal relationship is not for a single purpose. When you and your partner go out and finish grocery shopping, you don't say, thanks, I'll see you at the next grocery shopping opportunity. You move on to the next thing. It might be that you are talking about something, raising your children, doing your yard work, or doing something intimate. We have a lot of things that go on in our lives. We're not simply trying to achieve a goal. But professional relationships are for a purpose. We're there to try and achieve some results and hopefully reach some conclusion in that. And when we're done, unless there's some new need that emerges, our relationship ends. And that's a really important thing to understand. Personal relationships, therefore, don't have a time limit. You may choose to move on from a relationship. For example, you may not have the same list of friends that you did in grade 2, but you didn't have to do that. Whereas in a therapeutic relationship, we have time limits, and we have them in two ways. The first is that we set specific times that we are together. Even for those of us who are working in a paraprofessional role, where counseling is just kind of an aspect of our job, we have distinct shift times, and we are to be at work at those times and not to be at work at other times. So if I'm thinking about a typical counseling situation, I would say, okay, I'm supposed to see you from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. And outside of that, we would not, generally speaking, be in contact. You might have something where people have a crisis line or something like that. But short of that, we would not have people interacting with us. And the other way we mean this time limit is that we would have an end to our relationship once again. We would expect it to last a certain amount of time. Now, we may not know what that amount of time is going to be at the very beginning. I talked about it in video 1 that sometimes that can create challenges. For example, in employer assistance programs where they tell people you have 5 sessions or 6 sessions. Most counselors would not be comfortable with that, and I certainly understand that because it's difficult to say exactly how many sessions it's going to take for somebody. But what's key here is that we do ultimately want to come to some conclusion. Make sure you understand the nature of the therapeutic relationship. If you need to do additional reading, you can do that within the handout package or in the Jacqueline Small book. And this ends video number 2.